Hello, good everybody. Good evening, everybody. Can I ask you to put the slides over there? Perfect. Before we start and before I introduce myself, I'm going to start with the two stories. Two real stories what happened last year and one of them what happened this year. So in end of 2016, this gentleman, James Clapper, the former director of the NSA in the United States, mentioned that United States might use some of the IoT devices to spy on people. IoT devices are basically the internet-connected devices. You can imagine that's everything surrounding us right now. So printers, webcams, home data storages, TVs, and multiple other devices. At that point, he didn't mention that the US government is actually already doing this. 6 months after this announcement that the US government might be actually spying on people using the IoT devices, there was a big leak caused by the Russian hacking group to the CIA, which actually revealed some of the hacks which happened to the United States. And among those, one of them was actually talking about the vulnerability they used in the Samsung smart TVs. So generally what we try to point out in here right now is that all these surrounding devices around us, all these IoT devices, are actually a big problem to the security, to the privacy, and eventually maybe even to the democracy. So my name is Filip Chytrý. I work for Avast. I'm in charge of mobile threat intelligence. And today's big question is my microwave actually spying on me? It doesn't have to be just a microwave. I actually got a coffee machine today. But we will answer this question by end of the talk, and you will actually have a chance to join me on the stage and help me with a few of the experiments where we will reveal the data, and also you will be able to actually hack the webcam to brew the coffee for you. So our connected lives. Any device, basically, you carry with you right now can be connected to the internet at any time and any location. You don't realize that, but a couple years back, you've just been using laptops. Maybe like for the last 5 years, 6 years, you're using the smartphone. But you have multiple other devices like smartwatch. All of those devices might carry some of the vulnerabilities and can compromise your privacy. Recently, there have been a lot of studies about each of those devices being compromised. And if we consider the exponential growth of each of them, like how many of them are actually connected, we're talking about more devices connected to the internet today than there are people on the planet. By 2020, by the Juniper Research, they predict there will be almost 40 billion connected devices. That's about like 7 devices per person. At that point, you can imagine that any of these connected devices can actually compromise your privacy. I would actually ask the question, is there anybody who have like more than 5 connected devices in the room? I believe there will be plenty of you, right? Or what was the first thing you've done when you actually joined this conference? You probably connect your cell phone or your laptop to the Wi-Fi in here, just to kind of check your emails and find out what is going on. All those things might create the problems just by itself, but also they might be compromised by the devices which are connected around you. So there is basically a personal threat level you have to consider. So what are the data, what are the things you carry about, what are the things you care about the most, and what do you really want to protect in your life? We have a small experiment prepared for you in here right now, where I'm actually going to show you how easy it is to spy on you while you are connected to the Wi-Fi. There is a Wi-Fi which is called Forum 2000 Avast Test. I encourage everybody, like, feel free to connect to this hotspot right now, and we can have a look like what data actually we can see about you. Like, don't worry, it's mainly safe. We just filter like main requests, like if you're going to Facebook, Twitter, and web pages like that. But not really actually going into the privacy details like you might be going through the multiple other things. So let me try to open the web page in here. So what you can see right now is basically my Wi-Fi in here, Wi-Fi snitcher, which is showing you all the connected devices in real time and just highlighting the basic and most famous websites which we basically listed in the menu. So you can actually see like somebody just connected from iPhone, he's using mobile Safari browser, version of the iPhone, or you can see that somebody is using, what is it? Lumia 730 dual SIM. That's actually really unfamous, no, not really wide popular cell phone. So who does have a Nokia Lumia 730? You can get a fidget spinner. That's actually quite unique to phone these days. Not many people actually still have those Nokias. So here you go. It's a really good toy for kids, but yeah. Perfect, it's fitting your phone color. Anyway, this what we just show you in here are basically just a high-level data, but imagine any of these connected internet devices can actually compromise the same things about you. So for example, if they're sitting on the same Wi-Fi, even though that Wi-Fi might be secured, that particular device with the vulnerability can be actually collecting those data and collecting this information about you and sharing it with the other world, or maybe with some, bad hackers, government hackers, generally any like hacking groups, and basically, compromising you itself. So I mentioned it briefly, but this is the problem not just about the devices in this room and in general, like wherever you go. I can see two cameras pointing at me right now. These cameras theoretically might have a vulnerability and actually spy on you at the same time. But the biggest problem comes to your home. So if you are at home and you have like a TV, smart TV, you have a smart data storage with your pictures and data stored over there. Or if you're using your laptop, cell phone, webcam, maybe smart lock even, all these devices might cause a problem to your entire home security. So imagine this scenario. You'll be actually posting the pictures on social media that you just left to Prague to see the Forum 2000, and you might actually have a vulnerable webcam in your home network. And also you have a smart lock. The attackers itself can actually target the webcam to find out what devices aren't protected, find out that there is a smart lock on your door, and actually try to open the house and rob it. So there is a breach between the privacy and like online security going towards the physical security of your entire home. We ran the study, and we basically find out that among our users, on average, they have at least 8 connected devices at home. So even if you protect like a laptop and cell phone, there are still like 6 other points, where potential attacker can actually breach the security. So before I will go into the really bad things, I'll also mention the good part of it, of course. So me personally, I'm a really big fan of the new technology, and I'm really advocating for like there has to be involvement. And everybody should kind of test it out and actually widespread what is possible. I'm using Google Home, which is one of my favorite gadgets. It's like a personal assistant that basically you can ask like about the weather. You can ask like questions like what is the traffic to the work, like how many emails I have, and it answers all these questions to you. But there are of course big privacy problems with any of these devices. I have to say that Google Home, or for example Alexa, you might have heard of Amazon Alexa, have the security in a quite right level. So they actually share all the knowledge and all the questions with their systems in a secured manner. But the problem is that all the other companies are actually using these frameworks and build them into the third-party devices like other home stereo. And all of those might create the problems for your entire home security and actually compromise more details. In this case, we're already talking about emails, about your calendar schedule, and all the questions you're actually asking your Alexa. Let's go to the bad side. So I can name probably like 15 vulnerabilities for each of the home devices, which are just highlighted on the slide right now. So we mentioned that the US government is using the smart TV to spy on people, or been using the smart TVs from Samsung to spy on people. Then you probably heard of a lot of malware and breaches on the Android or either PC, Windows, Mac OS X. But last year, for example, there was a really big breach. It was called Mirai botnet on the webcam cameras, where actually attackers used the webcams to turn down the internet. So there were parts of the Europe where Facebook and Google was not accessible for many hours just because of the webcams targeting actually the certain websites online. This all is basically creating a lot of problems. And nobody kind of takes care of it. So as an example, I will show you like how easy it is to actually hack the, in this case, Philips webcam. It's this tiny, smart baby monitor with the vulnerability, and how you can use this webcam to actually brew the coffee on a coffee machine at your home. For that reason, I would ask like one volunteer to come over the stage, please, to help me out. So Hey, what's your name? Please.
Marianka.
Marianka?
My name is Marianka.
Hey, Philip, nice to meet you. So, first thing, we have to actually put the coffee inside. That's unfortunately still manual, so please just put the coffee in. Yeah. All right. And now the more interesting part. Now we will actually engage the attack from my laptop, and I'm going to let you to do it. So please come over here. You can see like you typing right over here in this console, right? Let me move the cursor for you. And what you have to type is bash. Just type in bash, B-A-S-H, space, I, yeah, doesn't matter about put capital I. Oh, sorry, you probably put the space in between. Oh, here we go. Let's do it this way. Let's do it short way. Brew, bash brew. Now press enter. And now you can see that the laptop is actually connecting to camera. It's trying to find out the initials on the camera and log in. And in a minute, the camera should actually send the command to the coffee machine to start brewing a coffee. Hopefully it will work. Let's see. It's always when you have like so many people on the same Wi-Fi in the room, you might get yourself in trouble. So let me see if I can fix it. Second try. Come on. Is it in electricity? You carrying like some kind of the Wi-Fi disruptor with you? Never mind. I will try to get this work by the end of the presentation when we'll have more time. Meanwhile, I can actually show you something else which is also interesting. So when you see the packets going in that visual way, right now what you can see in here on the screen are actually how it looks like in the console if you have devices connected. So you can see all the phones connected to the same Wi-Fi, including the brand, including the operating system, basically including what is behind the phone and all the requests. So I believe there's somebody with L21. It's like company. It's a phone number, phone name, and somebody is just sending like totally random request for the DNS server, which is probably for purpose, just to kind of jam the Wi-Fi. Let me see. I can try to turn this off. I will restart the coffee machine and give it a try in a minute. All right. You can sit down if you want. If you have somebody, you can give him the fidget spinners for help. Thank you so much. Big applause for...
By the way, I have no smartphone. It's too smart for me.
Good. Let me see if it restarted. I actually can connect to the camera. It's starting? Hooray! Just to restart. I shouldn't put like 12 cups now. It's going to take forever to brew the 12 cups. All right. So as you can see, you can theoretically use the webcam to actually brew the coffee for you. It's sometimes a little bit moody, but most of the time it works. And attackers have like plenty of time. So they can theoretically just trigger the script like 3 times as I did, and eventually it works most of the times. So the interesting part is that none of the scripts I've used are actually any sophisticated coding I did myself. I basically just downloaded the predefined script online. And the most interesting part is, just to highlight one last part on the code, is that basically this coffee machine can be triggered on by one simple command sent over the one IP address on the specific port. This is a little bit more technical for the technical people, but it basically means that the coffee machine is totally unprotected. That means like everybody who knows like how to send this command over the network can theoretically engage the coffee machine and actually brew the coffee in your home. So whenever somebody breaches the home security, let's say the router, let's say the webcam, he can actually start to connecting and controlling your devices. So there is a big problem. There are multiple providers of all these appliances. You have companies which were building the toasters for 80 years. And now they are trying to build smart toasters. I don't know why, but they're just doing it. The problem is there are also buyers on the market. So there are plenty of people who might buy just a microwave, coffee machine, or webcam. Webcam is at least a meaningful device. But their main target of all these appliance manufacturers is not to actually make the secure device and make sure that it's protected in a good manner. They're just trying to find the cheapest way on the market. They don't care about the security at all. And that's the reason why there is plenty of different unprotected appliances on the market which might cause this trouble. And also, at the same time, I know on the previous panel people have been talking about the regulatory issues of each of the governments. But personally, I believe there is not enough regulatory by government, driven by government, on the protection of each of those devices. So the chain works in a way that as an appliance manufacturer, you basically buy or you build the machine, like the coffee machine, and then you just buy the cheap chips from China for a couple dollars, which you don't control. And the only thing which you actually control on them is this turn on and off switch, basically, which triggers the machine on and off. But you really don't have an idea what is running behind it. You can actually run the email server on a light bulb these days. So there is a tiny computer, and you can use light bulbs to, for example, run the email servers. And the most scariest part is that the entire home network or the network anywhere is basically as secure as the weakest chain of the entire security. So when you breach the first point, like entrance point, you're actually gaining the access to all the other devices in that home network or company network. So a little bit about the regulations. I've tried to look up what are the current regulation laws on the different markets and how does it work. So there are more than 100 privacy laws these days, which is a good improvement since 90s. Back then there was like about 20 of them. There are different notifications set by governments that you actually have to notify the user whenever some of your devices get breached. But the problem is the appliance manufacturers don't actually have an idea if something like that happens. The good example of that is the Mirai from last year. And also there are data disposal laws. Including European Union, we have all these new laws which tells you whenever you have to delete the data of the users. But on the other side, which not many people realize, and that's actually the biggest problem I can foresee, is that means these data are actually collected, and there are laws and restrictions which tells you what has to be stored and how it has to be stored. It's a good progress that at least somebody is telling you how the data should be protected. But think of it the other way. If you are the mobile carrier, on average, in European Union, all of them have to store the data and text messages and phone calls for about 2 or 5 years. It depends on the country. But imagine all your phone calls are actually stored on the servers of the mobile carriers for 2 years. And the same thing goes for the IoT devices. So yes, they're collecting the data in a massive scale, and they can basically monitor what is going on. So now, few quick steps like how you can actually protect yourself and how this can be a little bit improved. So as you probably learned from the presentation already, it's a wide market and it's a little bit of the problem to control all the ecosystem. So basically control the appliance manufacturers. But what you can do as an individual, as a person, is to try to protect your data and not the devices. So let's say you don't care about the coffee machine being hacked. But in this case, you can, for example, try to set up the router in a secure way so nobody can actually breach into your home network. Or, even better, if you have some documents or pictures or anything which is like, could be you don't want these things to be exposed, you can at least encrypt them, or encrypt your communication. So what I do personally is like, you maybe heard of VPN, like Virtual Private Network. If you don't believe in the security of your home router and your home smart appliances, you can actually set up the VPN on the router to make sure that the tunneling between your country and your router going elsewhere, to the different parts of the globe will be secured at least, for first half of the traffic. So you make sure that none of these data leak. So basically, try to protect your data. Try to encrypt them. Try to make sure that you're using these VPN tunnels whenever you go. So if you are in cafeteria and there might be some compromised webcam spying on you the same way as I did on this Wi-Fi, if you are using the VPN, there is a big chance that that person will not be able to read anything because everything will be encrypted at that point. So if you use cell phone, laptop, or maybe other devices, just make sure that the encryption is there on any of your devices. I will tell you a little bit like what we do in terms of detecting all these type of breaches globally. So we have about 400 million users, like monthly active users. And they trust us. They trust our brand, like, to being the secure company and trust like of what is going on and how we handle the data. So we create the fingerprints in each of the homes. So whenever we see something suspicious going on with your webcam, for example, so some attacker is connecting to your webcam, we basically create the small pattern which we try to classify in the database. So what I'm trying to point out right now is that even if there is no way how to secure your webcam, there are still tools like antivirus, or let's say the security suites these days, which can help you to find out what are the problems and how this can be secured. And 3 basic things which can help you to kind of improve the security at least. So the first, try to choose the good vendor. If you're buying the IoT device, like internet connected device, try to look up the encryption they might be using. I know it might be hard. You mostly need a fairly technical person to understand how these systems works. But you can at least try to say like, okay, it's actually a bad example. I was about to say Samsung, but Samsung just got breached like recently by CIA, right? So try to look up like how they protect the traffic from the devices, or ask somebody who might give you the examples. Just don't buy the cheapest devices from China. Don't buy from unknown sources. All these devices might breach your home security. The second point, really important, is to keep all of them updated. Like, is there anybody who actually updated like his home web camera maybe, or updated his home stereo within like a year? No, you don't even realize, right, that some of these devices might actually have a firmware, and this has to be updated. It's a kind of scary situation. The problem is like general audience, if you are not a technical person, you basically don't know like this might be happening to you, right? So try to look up the updates for each of the devices you have connected in your home. Try to find out like, hey, I have a webcam. What's the way to update this firmware in it and make sure, or software in it, and make sure that it's actually protected. And the last point, as I mentioned, protection. So try to encrypt data. Try to use some antivirus tools which will help you to basically secure your devices. And in the best case scenario, some of them are able to find out if there are other problems in your home network. So as part of our product, we have home network security, which basically scans the entire IoT ecosystem and should be able to tell you, like, there is a problem, try to fix it. Try to find out like the ways how this can be done. So I know it was a little bit quick presentation. I would like to thank you for inviting me in here to our Avast Foundation and also to Forum 2000. We kind of had a feeling like this is one of the things which should be mentioned in here, so everybody will understand that not just a laptop and cell phone, but eventually all the other devices around you could be compromising your privacy. So now it's the time for questions. I have a lot of fidget spinners, so. Yes, it's a hardware, and no, there is no electricity in this one. You can keep it, please.
What is encryption?
Encryption means basically, I'm sorry, I'm a fairly technical person, so if you have any questions like to some of the terms I've used, please feel free to ask. So encryption basically means you have to take the data you normally have stored on your device and try to find out the ways how to encipher them. So basically try to find out the ways how the data could be changed in a way that only your program and the software you might be using can actually uncipher them so you can actually read them at the end. Imagine it in this way. Have you heard of Caesar, how was it called? Like every letter in the alphabet, for example, is like A, B, C, and you're going to move it a little bit. So instead of A, you will have B. Instead of C, you will have D. So encryption works a similar way, but much more complicated. So there are a lot of like permutations, like how all these things are exchanged and the keys used. So basically, you just like mess up everything, so nobody can read it if they actually intercept it, but only you have the keys to open the file again.
And without doctor degree, how do I do it?
There are free tools you can download online. So basically, if you just go to Google and try to find out encryption tools, you will find many of them. So I would just recommend a few of them. I don't want to give you brands directly, but there are, if first page on Google will give you like 50 different results. Just look up encryption tools.
Thank you for your presentation. I've been also following your website. And in Finland, my electricity company is trying to persuade all the clients to buy gadgets to be connected, Wi-Fi to everything, and they don't mention anything about the dangers. But there are some good websites that tell of exactly the same dangers as you. One question which is not on your website at all dealt with is how much electromagnetic radiation is involved in the traffic between all these gadgets? What frequency perhaps, and how many pulses there are, and could there be any health hazards?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm actually more on the field of the software on this part. So basically, most of these gadgets are running on the general Wi-Fi. So that's like 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. But how many data are eventually sent over, that really depends on the device itself. So let's say you have a smart kettle or smart coffee machine that's basically sitting and waiting right now. But if something is wrong and something is like hacked in this case, that might be the point where you find out there are a big traffic patterns going from the device. But unfortunately, I'm not able to answer you the question about the electromagnetic field. Here you go. All right. Any other questions? Please.
Hi. I've got like another point I want to point out. You are talking about now the personal effects and the personal securities. I would like to mention that these machines can also be used for attacks for someone else, like someone is using my machine to attack someone else. And I think this is a very important part because most of the time, like my home is not that interesting, but you can use like my coffee machine or my fridge to attack someone else.
Exactly. So that Mirai, which I was mentioning, taking down the websites such as Facebook and Twitter last year in Central Europe, is exactly the example of this, where people actually used the cameras of like normal people, and the general audience didn't have an idea that his webcam might be actually attacking the servers of Twitter at that point. So, and it actually was successful. They took down a couple of the websites. Thanks. That's a good point. Catch. Thanks. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Josef Shevchik, and I have a question if you have any statistics, like who is using the data, if like these are like the government or companies or like independent hackers or...
So I will actually maybe use the example of a few recent attacks. The Mirai botnet, I'm mentioning this one because that's the biggest from the last year, was most likely a governmental attack. They've been just testing out the infection vectors they can use against the governments and against the public infrastructure to find out like where are the boundaries, like what we can actually try to find out. So if you go on the like Silk Market Road and all these kind of dark websites, you can find out, you can buy some of these less sophisticated attacks for a few $100 as a root, as a kit basically. That's what I'm using for this coffee machine. It cost me $150. Just the information about these coffee machines are actually vulnerable. So there are 88,000 of those coffee machines in Europe, just for information. That's maybe unrelated. But I can send you statistics of what we collected over the email after. Because we know that, you know, we can tell you the statistics about how many devices are unprotected, for example. So I know from top of my head that more than 56% of the routers and Wi-Fis in Europe are unprotected, because we collect this information also on our side. But I cannot tell you like how many of the webcams been actually breached, because we might not be seeing all of them, right? This is just a general statistics based on our users, so I can tell you it's a lot of them. I can tell you on average 70% of like homes, smart homes, are eventually hackable. Like 70% of our users actually have a home which could be potentially hackable. But I cannot tell you like the exact number of the hacked devices in Europe. Can you catch it? All right. One more question?
Really, technology, what is it? Not I know nothing. How do you protect the routers?
So it really depends on the router manufacturer in this case. So in a very, very basic way, you can set up the secured Wi-Fi. So that means actually set the enough encryption. So WAP, for example, on the encryption of the Wi-Fi connection. Then you have to make sure that the passwords you're using on the router are actually like strong ones, you know, not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, but some meaningful password with big and lower cases and other things. And again, make sure that it's actually updated to the latest version of the firmware. And even that scenario doesn't mean that it's 100% secured. It just like means that there is a lower chance that somebody might be hacking into your router in this case. Go ahead.
I was a bit late to your performance, but isn't it so that if somebody wants to follow my daily rhythm and what am I doing at what hour of the day, it's quite possible. And this could be used for criminal purposes.
Exactly. So I mentioned at the very beginning that, for example, criminals can follow your social media feed to find out if you are at home and eventually use the devices in your home to unlock the house, for example. So, you know, I have a smart lock home in my place right now. That means like if the criminals breach my home network, they can actually open the front door. But some people might be using just like blind, you know, in newer houses, they might have like shades on the windows. All these things can be controlled theoretically at that point. Yeah, please.
I would be interested to know whether your foundation then is, let's say, advocating and informing about these threats also within governmental spheres.
So,
and then also the correlation also to governmental interests, company interests, and similar.
So I would answer a little bit different way. So I'm actually not working for a foundation, I'm working for Avast itself. So I'm on a technical team, and yes, we're actually collaborating with some of the governments on ways how to improve it. For example, next week I'm talking in Hague to Europol about some of the things which we see on Europe being a big problem. But on the other side, as a company, we can only kind of give them the advices what can be done, but we are not the laws, let's say, people who actually decide like what the laws will be and how it will look like. So as a foundation, they try to advocate and invite people to all these conferences as I am to help everybody, let's say the general audience, to find out like how they protect themselves. And we believe like specifically the attendance of forum might be actually good targets for the attackers. No offense, but so that's the reason why we realized like, okay, we should go over here and actually tell them that, you know, laptop and smartphone is not the only problematic space. But in general, we have some statistics. We talk to governments, but really like lightly. I don't want to say like we are involved with any of the like law restrictions or anything. We try to stay aside and basically create our own products which can prevent the attackers to attack the users.
Devices do get broken sometimes, and you need to get them repaired, and you need to take them somewhere, and you don't know what that somebody is going to do to it. Is it a big risk to take your device to the repair?
Okay, that's a good question. I'm just working on the experiment where we try to basically recover the data from the sold phones. So you go on eBay, or we went on eBay, buy like 10 phones and try to recover the data because the people are actually reselling those devices. That's exactly the same case as in yours. So your phone is broken and it actually goes to the hands of the third-party person. I would not say in all cases. I see you have an iPhone. If you have a latest iOS, that's actually encrypting the data by default, which is good. That means like nobody can actually read the data. But if you have some of the Android devices using the older Android version, theoretically, if it goes to the repair shop, I can read the data on your phone, or anybody can read the data on your phone. and find out what the problems are, not the problems, what the documents are over there. So, yeah. Does anybody want to have a coffee? It's done finally, I believe. So, no, not anybody. You prefer fidget spinner or coffee? Still a few more.
Actually, I have, very maybe private question. I want to sum up. What kind of messengers do you use? Because I'm not really sure this is this question is really in this theme, but still, because in Russia we prefer using Telegram. In China, I know they prefer use WeChat or something because of problems with the internet there. From Belarus, they prefer Viber or something. So this is very interesting question actually, because it's regional or international thing maybe, but still, just your personal opinion.
Only one of them you mentioned is actually the one I would recommend, and that's Telegram. Okay. That's actually using encryption keys, which are private for each of the conversations. But it still doesn't mean the attacker cannot breach it somehow, right? So, for example, they can target your cell phone if you have an older version of Android, and actually, through the vulnerability of your phone, gain access to your device and steal the keys. So at that point, they can actually read the private messages. It's not that easy, of course. It's another level of the problem and how to actually get into the data, but it's still there. And the Viber, and I unfortunately forget the last one you mentioned. WeChat. Okay, don't use those. They don't use encryption at all. I mean, about a year ago, I believe Facebook was really proud of itself that when they acquired WhatsApp, they mentioned all the WhatsApp messages will be encrypted and we're using private messaging keys for each of the conversations you might have. If you Google it, you actually find out few breaches within the last year, or even on a WhatsApp. So they've been actually successful in penetrating the WhatsApp text messages. So theoretically, if you might be a potential target, WhatsApp is definitely not a good way to go. Telegram, on the other side, is pretty good so far. I'll walk over to you. Or you can have a coffee.
I have a couple of questions. How is Viber in this scheme of things? Viber. And the other one is something I forgot. Oh, identity theft.
Okay, identity theft, I believe it's a different question, but answering the Viber, I've never used that one personally, so I don't want to that much speculate, but I would say most likely they don't use the private encryption keys, most likely. We can Google it together probably just to find out in 2 minutes. So the general answer on the messengers is try to Google the way how they encrypt the messages. So if you find out they're using private keys for each of the conversations, that's the thing which you can find out online, then most likely it's more secure than the others. And the identity theft, that's a bit different topic, but still related to the security. So eventually, all these devices can lead, or all the things I've mentioned can lead into the potential identity theft. Maybe you heard of the Equifax hack in the United States, where all the social security numbers been stolen to basically anybody. I don't know who is from the States in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah. So imagine that's basically the biggest identity theft which happened over the last, anywhere basically. This is the biggest identity theft ever so far. But none of these devices were involved. That was actually the problem of the server on the side of the Equifax. In our scenario, some of these devices might give you hints of what is going on, but if the service itself, let's say your bank is actually done in a good manner, then you should still be somehow protected. Even if the hacker is able to collect the data from the network, they should be encrypted enough if you're accessing bank, for example, so they will not be able to extrapolate the user identity from it. So don't steal your identity at that point. But stealing from social media, stealing from some of the messengers, stealing from sites like Equifax seems to be fairly easy. There are interesting angles on the credit card security. So, do you use the contactless payments? Some of you maybe? You've definitely heard of it, contactless payments, right? You can just swap your credit card over the pay terminal and actually find out what is going on. It costs you about like $150 to build a device which can actually collect the credit card details. If you just put it on the door in here, it will collect the credit card details of almost everybody. The range is about 40 centimeters, but if you put 2 of them from left and right, you could be collecting them. On the other side, so in Europe, you are mainly enforced to use chips whenever you pay something over like $20. So in that case, the transaction is fairly secure. There is encryption key in that chip, so I would not be afraid about that. What I would be afraid about is the magnetic stripes they use in the United States, because that's fairly easy to copy, and also these contactless payments, because that's just the vector which you can copy-paste basically from the credit card.
I have a question here. You mentioned a bunch of case studies of hacking, and you keep saying they. Who are they, first of all, typically, specifically in the cases you mentioned, like WhatsApp, and what is a typical profile of them from the they? The second thing is how safe are opposition activists in countries like Egypt and China when they use the VPN? Because a VPN, I have family that do this kind of thing, and I think a VPN is nice to have, but I get a false sense of security from it, I think. Or is it really secure?
So first, maybe I will answer the VPN question because that's quicker. So it depends on which VPN you are using and where the servers are located. So imagine you connecting from Egypt to some mid-European country like Czech Republic, Germany, and others through the VPN tunnel. So basically through the secure tunnel in the internet. I would say in that case the data are fairly secured. And the other, sorry.
I'm talking about the data is one thing, but the identity of the user is even more important.
So the identity of the user in that case is depending on the tool you are actually using. So the government will not see the identity of what you're doing. They will be able to see like you using MacBook and connecting to some server in Germany, for example. That's all. That's all they know.
They won't see your IP number? Your real
they will
IP
see
number?
the real IP number, but they will not see any of the data coming through. So they will not be able to identify that you're actually doing something suspicious, you know?
So it's already a red flag, though. If you're using a VPN, some people in positions of authority who are spying will have reason to think that there's some subterfuge going on. Why would you use a VPN, for example?
That's probably true. I don't want to speculate on this specific topic, but China is a good example that VPN is basically forbidden by the government. So I don't know. I don't want to speculate about Egypt, as you mentioned, but I would say, like, yes, it's a red flag. Like, if you see the traffic, if you are the internet service provider, you basically see all the patterns going through the network. You see, like, what are the requests? Basically, what you could see on that snitcher, which I just put over here on, like, a few minutes ago. You could see, like, all the requests. And the user who is using VPN, I would just see, like, he's there and connecting to one IP only. So that's already a red flag when you know like a lot of data is being like sent over to just one destination only. It already means like he's sort of hiding something, but I don't know. I don't hiding something, but I still use VPN. At least I don't feel. And the last question was like, what is the
Who are they? You mentioned
they
very often. I'm just curious in the case studies, who are the typical hackers?
I mean, it could be me even, right? I'm not joking. It's fairly easy for some of the cases. So what is growing a lot is the state espionage. So definitely we could see a little bit more attacks going from countries like China and Russia, focused on the, collecting the data about the users of other countries. But to give you the specific profile of the person, you never met them in person, right? Or I never met them in person. I just know like how they operate from some kind of the websites like Silk Road and some like dark web parts of the dark web. So you can find out there are organized groups where you can actually, either purchase code or they work for some like governments. Or on the other side, it could be like any high schooler guy who actually is like, having fun and try to target some of the websites. That's happening like mostly. So they, in most cases, are like low-level hackers who are just having fun and try to, disrupt the internet. And those are like 90% of the people who actually are involved with some sort of hacking. And the other 10% are like, really high-level, sophisticated people or organized teams. For the governments or organized for actually gaining the access or gaining the money, through some different vectors, attacking vectors. Gentleman over there.
Thank you very much for a big load of great insights. My question is more broad and more philosophical, and it is that I had the idea that better technology will help us to travel less and to save our environment. But as I'm listening to you, connecting all the dots, I feel that the only way we can trust each other without being intercepted is just to meet on a place like here.
You trust me if I have this thing in my pocket?
I trust you.
I mean, you know, like every one of us is actually carrying the cell phone, right? That's already compromising all the location data to the providers of the device itself. So I have an iPhone. Apple definitely knows like where I travel and where I go. So it really doesn't matter. In this particular case, if you actually create the VPN tunnel between your device and the endpoint device, so basically set up two separate, basically set up the secure connection between two endpoints, it might be safer than actually having the cell phone in the pocket. Because if you are the target, which some of you might be in this case, if you are the target, they might be focusing on your phone and actually wiretapping all the conversations you might have on the phone without you even knowing it. So it doesn't matter if it's happening in person or if it's happening like online in that case. So. Is that answering your question, or is it even more scary now?
Well, I don't wear a smartphone, so I'm good. But
so the answer is travel over there without any technology and lock yourself in a room where there is no signal. In that particular scenario, you are most likely safe. You know, whenever you have any piece of gadget and technology with you, the problem might occur.
So maybe a philosophical one. If I think of the encryption technology during the Second World War, you heard maybe about the Native American Hopi tribe. So I don't know. I'd say like a curiosity question, but are there some initiatives or new ways how to go around this? For example, we had a nice talk about how to creatively put together mundane pictures and have ideas from particle physics, putting together some two pieces. And then if you have a conversation where you fluently switch from a jargon in physics, chemistry, ancient history, literature, then just listening to a flow of the syllables, and then the other party will have a hard time, especially with languages where there are many words sound the same but mean different things. So what's the smart, educated intellectual who is an activist at the same time, the way forward? Is it something like a combination of these, like switching from topic to topic, from language to language?
Yes,
or
sort of.
What are your ideas?
So first, I would actually have a little bit of the small follow-up on this, like switching between the different languages, because that's the interesting part. With the development of the artificial intelligence, how they like to call it, but let's say with the development of the machine learning, all these antique ways like how to switch from one language to another to encrypt your messages is kind of obsolete, because at that point the machine learning can actually learn from the patterns and try to match it automatically to the previously known behavior somewhere on the internet, and most likely it will find out the solution to your less sophisticated encryption. But what is going on the let's say the IoT, let's say in the technical space, how we actually encrypt our messages in our case. We try to create the private encryption keys. So you have different values of the encryption keys. Like the most popular ones, you might have heard of ISE encryption keys. And they have a different byte values. That means like how sophisticated they are. So if you use something over like 256 bytes as an encryption key, like a unique encryption key, all the existing computers will actually have a problem to crack down this kind of encryption. And if you use like 512 bytes encryption keys, most likely you'll have a problem to actually, even if you use most of the power, like computing power in the world, to actually crack down these encryption keys. So there are different tools. Each of them are actually using some of these encryption methods. So our VPN is actually using AES-256. So if you intercept the traffic, I know for sure that nobody in our company will be able to actually crack down that traffic. That means like none of us actually know how to decipher this sophisticated encryption, even like in the company focused on the security. So hope that's helpful.
Those of you who don't know Czech, Philip's name in Czech means smart. My first question, is it encrypted?
No.
Comment I'd like to make is that it was impossible, as you know, to register yourself for this conference without computer. maybe we should put a question whether there's any other way. And the third one, I am just very low tech. Is baby monitor, known as Huvička here, potentially spying on me, my baby, the household, switching things on? And what are the common things that we use in a house other than computer? Perhaps not all televisions. I don't have a smart coffee maker. I don't have a, but what are they? Can you?
Okay. So most likely, I mentioned it through the presentation, but most likely all of you have a printer. So printer can be theoretically connected to your home network. That's the first, like, most problematic device because you actually have documents stored in the memory of that printer. So you don't realize that, but whenever you print, all these documents for a certain time are actually stored on the memory of that printer. That's like a first problem, which probably affects almost everybody. Then the webcam, not just the baby monitor, but in general, any webcam on the market. And I would say, without hesitation, that 80% of the webcams on the market are actually somehow vulnerable to the attacks. That means, like, you know, most of you, if you have some webcam at home, it's most likely hackable. The third one, which means you must have it at home if you're using computer, it's the router. So again, the router can be a really nice attacking vector for the attackers or some governmental spying. What else is like really common? So in my case, I'm really into the music, so I have the home stereo. The home stereo is actually a really sophisticated computer inside, so that can actually run like a small version of the operating system, so you can do multiple things. You can send the emails from home stereo if you want. Home data storages, so home data storage where you store the pictures. Or maybe more common thing is the TV, as mentioned in the presentation. Some of you, or most of you, probably have a TV at home, and some of you might have a smart TV at home. All these devices are potentially vulnerable to the attack. And as mentioned, the weakest part of the entire chain can actually compromise the security of the rest of them. So if somebody compromised the webcam, at that point he's most likely compromising also the TV because he's in that home network, and that home network is considered to be trusted by other devices. So the first line of defense is to try to make sure that your router is actually protected from the attacks from the outside. This one can actually let you to watch and hear the baby.
It's if I leave a baby in another room and I can hear it and it could hear me, I guess.
You mean the one which is not actually connected to the internet?
Huvička, yeah.
Okay. This is kind of like new version of Huvička over the internet, you know. That's why I got a little bit confused. So I never actually play with those. They work like walkie-talkies, like the wireless sort of radio. So if you know on which frequency to listen to, then yes, then you can listen to them. But it requires a proximity. That means you have to be nearby the house where that signal is actually, you know, floating through. So I would not be afraid of those. It's not sophisticated enough, and it requires, like, the attacker would have to go like house by house. So it's not interesting. I mean, unless you are like really like political target, and it will be worth it to actually have somebody like next to your house to spying on you. But
all right, sorry to ask another question, but the most disturbing case of alleged hacking I've ever heard of was it involved a journalist who was a freelance journalist who wrote an article for Rolling Stone magazine about 7 or 8 years ago. It was the article that took down General Stanley McChrystal. Do you remember that?
Unfortunately not.
This guy ingratiated himself to McChrystal's people, and he traveled with them, and he reported things in an article that they said which were insulting to Barack Obama, who was the commander-in-chief. Mm-hmm. So McChrystal was forced to resign. And it was a big deal. And this guy was on all these shows discussing his great journalistic coup, and some people said what you did is unethical. He was a lightning rod for journalism for a while. He strangely died in a high-speed car accident in Los Angeles, I think within a year, within 8 months or a year. He was in a big Mercedes that had a car computer, and he was going about 130 miles per hour, which is probably about 180, 190 kilometers an hour, down a street in Los Angeles. And he hit a tree, and it was at 1 in the morning. And there was speculation that what happened was a so-called Boston Massacre, which is the nickname for the hacking of a car computer, and that there were people in high places in the US government or wherever, maybe probably not the private sector, who wanted him dead and wanted to prevent him from doing what he did again. So first of all, have you heard of this case? And secondly, and if you haven't, look it up for sure. Secondly, is this a plausible scenario? Because I need evidence before I believe something like that.
Okay. I actually need evidence too, but I will give you 2 examples, and that maybe give you more insights. So, I unfortunately have not heard of this specific case, but I've heard 2 different cases related to car industry and hacking of the cars. So some of you might heard of the hacking of the Jeep, like a few months ago, sorry, like a year ago from now, where actually attackers attacked remotely the servers of the GM, General Motors, and gained the access of the wipers in the car, like stereo, engine, and things like that. So they could actually hack the car itself and influence the driving. But they could not influence the brakes and the throttle, so actually make the car go faster or brake it. Those are the things which were unconnected because they are still physically connected to the car itself, or at least the brakes are. The other hacking situation I heard of recently is the BMW. It was actually not really exposed to the public, but BMW had the problem that some of the attackers hacked their sat-nav navigation system, and they point out like totally different weird places around their map, like McDonald's everywhere around the globe and things like that. So that was again influenced like on a higher level of the software of the car itself. So for me personally, it's hard to believe that the person might panicked, right? Because there was something wrong and weird going on with his car in that specific scenario. So yes, there might be hacking involved, like his wipers might go crazy, his blinkers might go crazy, some lights might go crazy or they turned off. But I don't believe that if there was something going on with his brakes, so if he actually pressed the brake pedal, because that's the one which is still physically connected with the car, even if there is like some malfunction on this electronic system, the car itself will still brake. So I don't know if that answers your question, because I'm still saying there are possibilities that something might be wrong with his car, like the wipers, lights, but physically, he could still stop the car if he wanted to. But you might just panic at that situation. I don't know what I would do at that. If everything goes crazy, you might be like, hey, how should I react? What is my next reaction? What is the next move? You might be just scared and actually, hit the tree by yourself at that point. And the same thing goes for the wheel. So maybe you probably heard of these Teslas and Volvos and all the cars with the self-driving functionalities, which actually steers the wheel for you. But the wheel itself is still connected with the steering. And the servo engines in the wheel are not powerful enough to actually overtake the control. So if you keep your hands on the wheel and you just force against the engine, you still can drive the car towards a different direction. The problem is like if you start relying on those technologies, it's like you actually take your hands off the wheel and let the car to drive. Then it can actually go crazy and go left. So if something like that might have been involved, but yeah. It will be just a speculation, I'm sorry.
Somebody actually just died in a Tesla, I think it was an S80 a few months ago. Yeah. You can look it up. He drove into a truck.
Yeah, but I've heard of this specific topic.
Yeah, it was because the hubs on the truck, the hubs that came out of the wheels were reflecting light in a way that confused the sensors.
Yeah, and also he actually did one more thing wrongly. He put the laptop on the dashboard and he was watching the movie, which was actually reflecting into the camera. So there were two things, two accidents. One camera was actually the front camera on the front hood was reflected by the truck in front, and the other camera, which is right on top of the roof, like on the front glass, basically on the top, was reflected by the laptop and by some movies. So these two things at the same time went wrong. But it's basically the answer is like don't put your laptop on the dashboard and don't watch the movies while you're driving. But no, I'm advocating for Tesla in this case, but yeah. Okay, I have 2 more minutes, so last question. This is pointing with the... All right, thank you. Okay, last one then.
I would like to know your opinion on smart cities and governmental efforts on open data when we know how the data can be easily misused. What do you think about it?
So, it's the same situation with the rest of the IoT. Whenever you connect something to the internet, it's generally a bad idea if you believe it's supposed to be secure and unconnected. Other example, 6 months ago, there was a big breach of the data of BART. BART is basically Bay Area Rapid Transportation. It's like a metro transport. And the hackers actually gain the access to control the metro system and control the gateways where you have to pay for the metro. So there was a free public transport for everybody for 2 days before they actually make all the system works. So basically it's already happening. If you have a connected cities, smart cities, it's a good idea, of course. I mean, if you make it right. But in general, even the Silicon Valley basically couldn't make it right? And the Silicon Valley is basically some kind of the place where all this technology is coming from. So if, metro in San Francisco can get hacked, what you can expect from the other cities? That's kind of my answer. So you should keep, one last thing. You should keep it as a separate smart city outside of the network. So create a side network which is still connected, but not really connected to the same internet network, So basically create something which you can be called intranet with maybe 1 or 2 points where it's actually connected to the internet. But if you're using the internet as an infrastructure to transport the data, there are multiple problems which might occur. So, yeah. I'm out of spinners, sorry. But I can have a coffee.
It's a very short one, yeah? How safe is Czech Republic? I don't know if you know about this, but the intelligence services over here are quite good, like the Czech intelligence. How much data is being shared with the EU?
So I would start with the EU. So we don't share with them on a daily basis. We just give them recommendations like, hey, this is what we see in the homes of our users, and those are the problems you should probably kind of focus on, because we believe 75% of the homes can be hacked, and these 3 basic steps can actually help to prevent this type of hacking. How secure is Czech Republic? Okay. I can look up the numbers of the hackable homes versus the rest of the Europe, but you would have to shoot me an email to actually give you a little bit of the statistics. But I might actually have, it seems like you are from India. I might have a last thing which might be really interesting to know about India. So, sorry about that, but I'm just negotiating one contract right now with the Indian carrier, mobile carrier. And they're forcing us to actually send a subscription notification about every single user who subscribed to the mobile security solutions to the government servers. And I'm always asking, why do you need to know this specific user actually using our security solution? And why we have to do it? So this is on behalf of the mobile carrier in India. And why the government actually needs to know the user actually using Avast Mobile security in his home, or PC security. I'm just this is kind of a strange answer to me. You can maybe explain me why, but I was why? Yeah. All right, thank you for your attention. Please feel free to talk to me right after if you want. And yeah, thanks for being in here.